This is the latest render we received, guys. Now, in the frame buffer, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's the layer star section over here, which is referred to as the Photoshop tab. The purpose of layer star is, for each layer I add, to have a specific function. The denoiser section, look, when I turn this off, you can see how the blemishes are removed. The more sufficient the light is, the smoother the render you'll get. When you turn on the denoiser, a fantastic render greets you. This needs to be on, guys. It already comes on automatically. In the settings section, when you click on this tab, from here, you can see that the denoiser section is on, and it says Vray denoiser. There's no need to fiddle around and mix things up too much here. Normally, there are multiple sections here that perform denoiser operations. Vray does our job more than enough. So, as I said, since there are a lot of settings in Vray, we go for the clearest and cleanest version, guys. Now that we've done this, we've come to the prem buffer. So, what can I do here? What do I need to do? Now, what I'm going to do here is, that's one aspect of the situation, guys. When I click on the plus sign, I'm adding the part that I call exposure. Look, I've added exposure here. The eye is active. These are off. The ones with the eye active are the ones that are currently active in the scene. Why did I add exposure? Look, there's an explosion here, guys. Look, there's an explosion here. I'm adjusting that explosion throughout the scene. After adding exposure, a settings box appeared at the bottom. Did you see? Look at highlight burn. Actually, the part we call highlight burn refers to the explosion here. Friends, now keep your eyes here. Look, I'm going to pull the cursor down here. Do you see it, guys? Look. If I can clearly see the background with the ground here, if I can see the transition in the sky, then this is now at a good consistency, or I can increase it like this. Look, it's nice right now. As you reduce this, the amount of contrast also increases. We can see that it's decreasing in the scene. That's why they put the contrast here. When I increase this, look, there's a certain saturation in the scene. If you want even more brightness inside, it's helpful to slightly increase the exposure. There's a bit of balance to all of these. So you bring it to this consistency without burning the highlights too much, without increasing the contrast too much, and without raising the exposure too much. Friends, this is the frame buffer setting. Lens effects in the frame buffer setting. You can open the lens effect from here. Look, I'm opening the lens effect from here. Look, I've added a bloom effect here, slightly, and with this, we call it the glare effect. You can adjust the bursts of light, which we call the bloom effect, where the colors coming from the light are set. Look, I'm closing it, the window curtains. Look, friends, I'm opening it again. As you can see, this part gives an effect like this. A simple and effective method. Look, normally I would say subscribe. I have a white background behind me. As you can see, you can easily color the background by simply applying an HDR file to it. Look, now I want to show you this. Normally, a doom light is added to the background in a month, a picture is placed, or this effort is made in different ways. Friends, but there's no need for any of that. There's a very simple method. As I always say, I'm showing simple but effective methods. Look, it says background. Background. Look in the enormous menu. The background section. Background image. I have a checkered flag here. Look, my checkered flag is active. If you see that any checkered flag is active like this on an individual, there's a setting here. If it's closed, there is no setting. Look, there is no setting here. I'm clicking on the settings section in the background part. Look, it says environment sky. The part it refers to as sky is the sky section, friends. It's not the sun. Don't confuse this with the sun. Think of this sky section as the environmental elements that are covered by the clouds in the sky. That's the method for changing it, friends. We can change this. Look now. I'm coming over here. I've come to the settings. I've come to the settings section. I'm right-clicking. I've made this a bit cleaner. I cleaned it up. I clicked and clicked. I'm going to the bitmap section. Sorry, I added it incorrectly. Friends, let's delete this. I've come to this part from the settings. I've come to the bitmap section. I'll give it to you here. It could be an HDR file. Or I'll tell you where you need to download your HDR files. You mark this part. Open it. It comes here. It loaded a little while ago. Look, this came to the background. We only did this, friends. We didn't do anything else. We uploaded the image and left it. Look, I've opened the frame buffer again. I pressed the render button. In the background, the HDR file that I added will show itself here. Of course, we're in the progressive render section. As you can see, that part has shown itself here, friends.